Welcome to Read Ancient Languages. I'm Dr. Fausto Labruto. Today we travel to Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, to talk about the Hittites and their language. The Hittites were an ancient people who formed an empire centered on the city of Hattusa around 1600 BC. The Hittite Empire expanded throughout the following 300 years and reached its greatest extent in the second half of the 14th century, when it comprised most of Anatolia, modern-day Syria, and even Upper Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent. Up until the beginning of the 20th century, we knew very little about the Hittites. We knew they were mentioned in the Bible, in the Old Testament, but we had no real appreciation of the extent of their power. And one of the main reasons for this is that their language had not been deciphered. The Hittite writings that were found by the archaeologists in Turkey were not deciphered until 1915. So today we will focus on the Hittite language, its origins and its characteristics. The first thing to know about the Hittite language is that it is an Indo-European language. Indo-European is a language family native to Eurasia. All Indo-European languages descend from a group of people who lived in the steppes of modern-day Ukraine, sometimes between 5,000 and 4,000 years BC, and from there they spread over Europe and Asia, bringing with them their language, which is called Proto-Indo-European. Now, it is important to remember that this language is not recorded. We don't have a record of it because writing had not been invented yet. With time, all these people developed their own languages, which were all descending from Proto-Indo-European. That's why languages spoken today across Europe, with very few exceptions, even languages as different as English and Greek, are all Indo-European in origin, and are all related because they can be traced back to that common ancestor, the Proto-Indo-European. I mention all this because Hittite is the first of the Indo-European languages of which we have a written record. Hittite was spoken long before it was written. So when they started to write, the Hittites borrowed the writing system from their neighbors in Mesopotamia, the cuneiform writing. And this brings me to the next most important fact about the Hittite language. The Hittite language is written in cuneiform. Some people think that cuneiform is a language, but it isn't. It's a writing system. Many different languages of antiquity used cuneiform as a writing system. It is a writing system like the Roman alphabet is a writing system. Today, for example, we use the Roman alphabet to write languages as different as English and Turkish. So, when the Hittite adopted cuneiform to write their own language, cuneiform had already been used for many centuries to write Sumerian and Akkadian, the two main languages of Mesopotamia. This was a problem for the linguists who tried to decipher Hittite, assuming it would be related to Sumerian or Akkadian, because it was written in cuneiform. It was the Norwegian linguist Knudson who first realized that Hittite is an Indo-European language. And some years later, the Czech linguist Hrozny was the first to translate Hittite. And because of this common origin of Hittite and the other Indo-European languages, we can find Hittite words which are very similar, for example, to ancient Greek. In Hittite, the word bone is hastai, which is similar to the ancient Greek word for bone osteon. And knee is geno, which is identical to the Latin word for knee. And there are also similarities with languages spoken today, thousands of years later. For example, the Hittite word for heart, care, is almost identical to the French cœur. And the Hittite word for water is water. And I could go on. Also, words in Hittite change their ending through a system of declension which is very similar to the ones used in ancient Greek and in Latin. And verbs are conjugated following a pattern which is not too different from modern-day French or Spanish. For today, I'd like to focus on the writing system rather than the grammar. So Hittites were influenced by Sumerian and Akkadians and borrowed words from their vocabulary. They also borrowed what we call determinatives. The determinatives are signs which are not meant to be read. They're just written before a word to inform the reader about what kind of word that is. So here's an example. This symbol is placed in front of a name to indicate that what follows is the name of a god. It comes from the Sumerian word for god, dingir. However, it is not meant to be read out. Another thing that Hittite did was to borrow a word from Sumerian or Akkadian, spell it in Sumerian or Akkadian, but read it out with the corresponding Hittite word. This is a bit more difficult to get our heads around. So for example, this is how Hittites would write the word king. It's the Sumerian word lugal. However, they would not read it lugal. They would read it with their own word for king, which is hassus. To make things even more complicated, sometimes Hittites attached suffixes to Sumerian or Akkadian words, for example, to make plural or to give the genitive of the word. And we have examples of Hittite plural suffixes attached to Akkadian words, or of Akkadian genitive suffixes attached to Sumerian words, and so on. So in order to read the Hittite, one has to have a basic knowledge of Sumerian and Akkadian, which are two completely unrelated languages. This puzzle of words leads to some interesting results. As an example, I'll show you how the name of a king was written. This is King Hattushili III. He was king of Hittites in the 1200s BC. The name Hattushili means man from Hattusa, the capital city of the Hittite kingdom. If we were to spell his name in Hittite cuneiform, we could write something like this, and it would be orthographically correct. However, his people spelled his name in a totally different way. First of all, they would put a determinant, a Sumerian sign which means that what follows is the name of a man, and this is not pronounced. Then, they would write a Sumerian word composed of two signs. The first sign is not meant to be read, and it means the word which follows is an object made of wood. And the second sign is the word itself, the Sumerian word gidru, which means scepter. However, they read it with the Akkadian word for scepter, which is hattu. Then they added the Hittite dative suffix, which is si. Then the Sumerian word for God, dingir, which they did not read. And then they attached the Akkadian genitive suffix lim, and they read this whole group as ili, which is Akkadian for of God. So the result reads Hattushili, which is the name of the king, but because of the way it is written, it conveys the symbolic message scepter of God, which is a sign of respect to the king. So in conclusion, the Hittite language is the first Indo-European language of which we have a written record, and it is fascinating to see the similarities with other Indo-European languages spoken thousands of years later, including English. The writing system of the Hittite language is cuneiform and comes out of a mix of Hittite, Akkadian, and Sumerian. And I hope I gave you a good overview of how incredibly sophisticated it can be. Thanks for listening to Read Ancient Languages. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook and Instagram for updates.